Hi guys, it's me, Chazza HD, and welcome to my 2024 Formula One season preview. Hope you guys are well. Of course, pre-season testing finished on Friday, which was, 5 days ago? And tomorrow will be the beginning of the first Grand Prix weekend in 2024. Cannot wait to finally get into it and more so find out what the performance is like and where certain teams are, because I don't think from testing we got still the greatest idea as to where certain teams are. So yeah, really looking forward to practice tomorrow. And of course, qualifying is on Friday for the Bahrain Grand Prix, and then the race day on Saturday. The race day being Saturday because of Ramadan for this weekend, and the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix next weekend as well. But yeah, cannot wait to get into it. And what we're going to be doing in tonight's stream is focusing on three separate things for this season preview. So firstly, we're going to look back at testing, and I'm going to get into the best lap times from testing, and also get into what tyre was used for each team when they did their best lap time of testing. We'll go through also what some of the drivers from the top teams said about their cars and how they're feeling going into the season. And I will give my thoughts as to where I think the pecking order is right now on performance. Then we'll get into the season itself, and I will give my final predictions for the Drivers and Constructors Championship. And I want you guys in the chat and the comments to let me know, for the top 10 of the Drivers' Championship and the Constructors, how do you think it is going to finish up in 2024? Let me know during the stream or after if you're watching this after. And obviously, we'll go through the top teams in the midfield during this stream and how I think they're looking going forward for the season. And then we'll have not a massively long look at the Bahrain Grand Prix itself, looking at how certain teams will perform around this type of circuit, which is quite a high-speed circuit, and it does favour cars that are very quick at high speed, down the straights and that. And yeah, we'll get into that as well. But just want to say, hope you guys are well after the last few days, and after pre-season testing, of course, finished last week. And no matter what part of the world you're in, what time zone you're in, hope you're all having as best a time as possible, as we are almost at the beginning of spring. So, let's get into, firstly, what happened in pre-season testing. Actually, before I do, just remembered there is a poll running at the top of the live chat, and I have asked in that poll, who do you think out of Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, and Aston Martin, who will be the closest competitor to Red Bull in 2024? I'll get into who I think will be the closest competitor in a bit. I want to hear from you guys in that poll as to who you think it will be. So during the stream, make sure to let me know, and when we come to the end of the stream, I will finish up the results and see what you guys have to say on that. But yeah, with pre-season testing, the teams did not push as hard as I thought they were going to. Definitely on that final day, I thought it was a very underwhelming final day of testing. We never really got to see, especially the top teams, really, getting into the 1 minute 29s, which I think definitely, when it comes to pole position at the Bahrain Grand Prix this week, I think we'll definitely be seeing those lap times. Maybe even a 128 from, say, Red Bull, if they do have clearly the best car, at least in qualifying conditions. So, yeah, wasn't the greatest preseason testing. Probably the most boring preseason testing we've had in quite a few years, I have to say. Probably since 2020, I would say, which of course was right before we had a shutdown for the season. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. But yeah, testing not that interesting compared to the last couple of years, but we did eventually get to the end of it, and we now have the best lap times from testing, which we're now going to go through just to see where on the short run pace, where certain teams were and how they're looking compared to one another going into at least the first couple races of the season. Now, these lap times, I've done team by team rankings, first all the way down to 10th place, and I've included there in brackets at the end, as you can see, what tyre each lap time was done on. So, Carlos Sainz did the best lap time of testing at 1:29.9 on the C4 compound, only 0.2 of a second slower than last year's pole position at the Sakhir International Circuit. And Ferrari, over a single lap, are very, very quick. There is no doubt about that. And I think, compared to Red Bull over a single lap, I think they've got a seriously quick car. Maybe not the quickest, but I think definitely at certain Grand Prix this year, a higher speed circuits, we know, Ferrari's power unit very, very strong. So at higher speed circuits, I am expecting Ferrari to have a really strong car in fighting for pole position to maybe even a couple race wins this year. And that's why I think for this weekend's race, they're going to be pretty competitive, at least in qualifying. Mercedes then was second. Russell 4.5 tenths off Carlos Sainz. Mercedes were one of the teams that were sandbagging the most. That was clear to see. But I am very confident that Mercedes do not have a car right now that is as quick as Red Bull and Ferrari. Maybe you could say the Mercedes over, with its race pace is quicker than the Ferrari car, but I still don't think that is clear because Ferrari's car, by the sounds of it, has improved with its time management and its race run pace as well. So, yeah, I think Ferrari are clearly ahead of Mercedes in most facets, I would say, at the moment. The only area really to watch out for, again, is the race runs to see if Mercedes are, very competitive on those compared to the Scuderia. And then you had Zhou Guanyu, third quickest, and the Sauber team coming out of testing looking pretty positive. And I think in the midfield, and when I say the midfield, I'm talking really about Williams, Alpine, Haas. I think Sauber are looking pretty good for this year. And for the first race weekend, I think they're going to have a pretty competitive car. They definitely will be a contender for points this weekend. But I don't think they're anywhere near, top 5 quickest teams on the grid or anything like that. And then the fourth best team, Red Bull, Sergio Perez, his best lap time, a 1:30.6, but on the C3 compound, which will be, I believe, the soft compound tyre for this weekend's Bahrain Grand Prix. Once you do the tyre correction from the C3 to the C4, Perez probably would have been only a 10th off Carlos Sainz's lap time if he had done that lap on day 2 on the C4 compound. But we know, of course, Max Verstappen can go quicker than Sergio Perez. So, yeah, I think Red Bull around most tracks are going to have a quicker car, definitely in qualifying and obviously in the race as well. Again, though, at certain circuits that will suit Ferrari a bit more, I think it will still be close between those two teams. So Red Bull are not going to, get pole position at every single Grand Prix, and I don't think we'll win every single race this season, but I think Red Bull have definitely got the best overall car for 2024. Racing Bulls then, 5th best team. They have got it's a good car. It's good, it's very good compared to what they had this time last year, but maybe you could argue is a slight bit underwhelming compared to maybe the hype that we had coming into 2024. I think, though, we have to remember with the Racing Bulls team that with their car last season, around tracks like Bahrain, where it's, very open and, lots of straights and that, they weren't that competitive at those types of circuits. They were quite a bit more competitive at, tighter, twistier, high aero tracks. And I think that is where that car is going to be at its best. So I don't think we've seen the best of that team as of yet. And I do think outside of the top 5 teams from last season, I think Racing Bulls are best of the rest. So yeah, Racing Bulls I think are still looking good. And I'm pretty sure as the season goes on, they will get better. Williams, I mean, Alex Albon was talking very highly of the Williams car, but I don't think overall, compared to everyone else, their car is that great. It's not, very slow or anything like that. It's still a competitive car. It's going to be competitive in that midfield fight for the last couple points position 2024. But I don't think it's, as quick maybe as it was at certain races last year. And I would say right now, Sauber have a better car overall than Williams do. And I'd say Racing Bulls as well have a better car compared to Williams. So not looking great, but their car is still competitive enough to be in the fight, which is good. The seventh best team here was McLaren, but they did their best time with Oscar Piastri on the C3 compound. They have got a lot more pace in the bag, have McLaren, and I think over a qualifying lap at the moment, I think Mercedes probably have the edge over McLaren, but not by that much. We're talking maybe a tenth or so. And then in the race, again, we're talking over the course of a Grand Prix, probably a few seconds. So I think McLaren are probably, in between Mercedes and Aston Martin, but I don't think they're that far away from Mercedes. Again, I think it's maybe a tenth or two, something like that. I don't think it's going to be, close to half a second. I think that would be quite the surprise. Aston Martin, they did their best time on the C3 compound. Aston Martin as well, I think they are not a million miles away from Mercedes, but I think they are a bit further away than McLaren will be. So, yeah, Aston Martin, I'm not really that confident for them going into this first Grand Prix. But as I said with the Racing Bulls team, I don't think the Bahrain track necessarily suits their car. So, I think they'll show more performance, probably, say, in Saudi Arabia to a degree, and definitely once we get to tracks like Shanghai, Miami, Imola, I think we'll see more performance from the Aston Martin compared to, say, Ferrari, Mercedes, and McLaren. And then you got Haas, ninth best team. Surprisingly, we thought they'd be the last team with their lap times, but still quite far off the teams ahead. And I think Haas have still got a pretty poor car. And then you have Alpine, who had a disastrous preseason testing. Their car is overweight. It lacks quite a bit of downforce. It's slow on the long runs and the quick qualifying runs as well. The drivers are not happy with it. The engineers are not happy with it. That's what we've heard from inside the paddock. And yeah, Alpine are heading for a pretty bad season, put it that way. They're not going to be, way behind every single other team. They're still going to be competitive to a degree. And again, like with Aston Martin and Racing Bulls, I don't think they're going to be at their strongest at a track like Sakhir in Bahrain. Because we have to remember, Alpine, they do have the worst power unit on the grid, which of course doesn't help around a high-speed circuit like we have here in Bahrain. So their performance is going to be a bit worse than it will be, say, when we go to Monaco and places like that. But again, we didn't get necessarily the greatest idea from testing as to where certain teams were, but I will quickly just look at my notepad here and go through what I think the pecking order is currently going into the first Grand Prix. Of course, this will evolve and change during the season like it did last year. So Red Bull, I think, overall have the best car. And when I'm talking about the best car, I'm talking about in terms of race pace. Yeah, Red Bull, I think I've got the best car. Ferrari, I think, just about will have the second best car over a race distance compared to the teams behind them. And definitely when it comes to qualifying pace, I think Ferrari at worst have the second best car on the grid. And then you've got Mercedes in third. I think they are just about ahead of McLaren, but still comfortably behind the top two teams. And then McLaren I've got in fourth. Aston Martin for the moment I've got in fifth. And then sixth, I would probably go Racing Bulls just ahead of Sauber. Again, Sauber I think are pretty competitive in that midfield fight, but still not quite as quick in my view as Racing Bulls. I think Racing Bulls will have the better car in the say in race conditions in Bahrain, and over the course of the season I do expect Racing Bulls to have overall a faster car. And then I would say what, Williams eighth, probably at the moment, probably Haas ninth, and then Alpine, yeah, you'd probably have to say in 10th place. But again, Alpine, I don't think this track is indicative of what their true performance is, especially aerodynamically. So we'll see how they are in a couple of months when we come to tracks that, suit their car more. But that's how I would say the pecking order is right now. Let me know in the chat what you think the pecking order is. That's what I think it is going into the first Grand Prix. But what we're going to do now, before we move on to the, before we move on to championship predictions and stuff like that. By the way, for everyone watching, make sure to smash the like button if you haven't already. Of course, does help the channel grow. Just want to read certain things out from drivers for the top teams in regards to how they feel about their cars going into this season. See if I can find some. Let me have a look. I won't be able to read out quotes from all the drivers from the top teams, but I'll try and find a couple if I can. So here is Charles Leclerc, who was playing down expectations by the sound of it of Ferrari, despite them having the best lap time of pre-season testing. And coming out of testing, he said, quote, "From the first lap on the simulator, it felt like an easier car to drive whenever we drove with some wind. Similarly on the track, from the very first laps here. Once we got here, the feeling was good. We managed to be consistent straight away, and this will help the race runs. However, drivability and competitiveness are two very different things. Last year, we were struggling a lot to be consistent because the car was just a little bit all over the place wherever there was some wind, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, especially in qualifying, that doesn't mean that we'll win a lot thanks to that, and that doesn't mean anything compared to Red Bull, so we'll have to work a lot and then see how competitive we are next Friday, which of course is this Friday. But I am confident that we definitely did a step forward in terms of tyre management, but because whenever tyres are used or more used, the weaknesses of the car are more apparent, you can feel them more, and with the characteristics of this car, it should be quite a bit better. And in terms of my thoughts of Ferrari for this season, I would say that is about what I think. I think they've made a clear step forward, but I still don't think we can say in quali and race trim that they are on the same level as Red Bull. I think they are still a step behind, but there will be races definitely this year where they will be on the same level as Red Bull. So we will see when those Grand Prix occur. George Russell for Mercedes. He believes that Mercedes and their car is also a clear step forward. He said after testing, quote, "The car last year was challenging to drive. Lewis and I had no confidence in it. It felt like it was going to bite us at every single corner. Now we can attack the medium and high-speed corners without the rear end snapping out. We feel like we've made a really good step in terms of the consistency of the car. We can really lean on it better than we've been able to in the past, and that was a huge focus throughout last year. We saw many flaws with the W14, which the team has done a great job to rectify. And Russell believes the new car is a strong starting point for the team's development program over the course of the year. And he said about that, quote, We've now got a car mechanically where the aero guys can go and focus on just building downforce upon that. Whereas in the past, whatever we did aerodynamically, there were underlying issues with the race car that took a while to understand and solve. And what it means by that is that because the fundamental design of the car was flawed and fucked, even with aerodynamic upgrades and alterations, because the car fundamentally was screwed, there was nothing really they could do long term and in a big way to shift their performance. But now, obviously, they've had, quite a few months in the winter. Now they've made a step forward as well. And with Mercedes, I think they are going to be definitely at certain races a bit of a dark horse. And I think they will definitely take quite a few podiums this year. I do expect their car, certainly in the race, I do expect it to be quite competitive compared to, say, Ferrari at times. So, yeah, Mercedes looking all good on that front. And we'll just read out, if I can, thoughts of one of the McLaren drivers before we go any further forward. If I can. Looney Classics in the chat just saying, what makes Allison think Mercedes have a faster car than Ferrari? The best way to explain that is he must think that over a race distance, the Mercedes have a better pace. I think he probably will accept that Ferrari over a qualifying lap probably have got a better car. But I think really, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to have a faster car, you want to have a fast car in the race. You don't have a fast car in qualifying because obviously the points are scored on Sunday. So I think that's probably what he means more so than like Mercedes being clearly quicker in all areas. But Lando Norris, confident that McLaren are going to be in very good shape and obviously in much better shape than they were this time last year, where they looked as bad as Alpine look at the minute. Maybe not as bad, but definitely was down there. And he said after testing, quite, I think the issues we've had over the last few years was just lack of preparation and knowledge of certain things. This year, I think we've been definitely a lot more prepared in every area, so I'm very happy about that. Team did encounter some problems during the test last week. They didn't do a ton of running, did McLaren. And he said about that, quote, the team has done an excellent job to get everything ready, not have any faults like that. Various other things have happened. I mean, it's good that they've happened now. We can prepare for them a bit more in the future, but not through a lack of preparation or knowledge, just some little things here and there. So it's unfortunate, but I think the whole outlook from the team is in a much, much better position. And credit, by the way, in terms of the quotes, to racefans.net, of course, for their brilliant reporting. But, I mean, he's absolutely right. McLaren are going to start the season a lot better than they started last year, and probably the best they're going to start a season since probably, 2011, 12-ish was the last time they started the season with a car this competitive. So he's right with that, but I think McLaren know that they definitely don't have one of the top 3 best cars. But as they said after their car reveal, in-season development is going to be very important for them. And because they haven't been able to maximize the car so far with the design, that in-season development is really going to save them, or at least they hope it will. So they may not have one of the top 3 best cars right now, but in 2 months from now, they very well could. So, yeah, we'll see where they are once we get to, say, start the European season. I reckon we can see McLaren really start to kick on, and hopefully they do, because it was really great to see them get properly, into that front pack fight, because, of course, they've not really been part of it for the last decade or so. But those some quotes from some of the drivers coming out of pre-season testing. Let's now, though, go into my championship predictions for the season ahead. What I'll do is go through the top 10 of the Drivers' Championship, and my top 10 for the constructors, and then we'll go team by team, and I'll get into why in more detail I think those certain teams are going to have the seasons that I predicted them to have. So let's start with the Drivers' Championship. So Max Verstappen, I think, will pretty easily win his 4th consecutive Drivers' title. And I think out of the 24 races, he'll win 20 of them. So Red Bull are still going to dominate quite a bit. Leclerc, I think, will finish in 2nd with 2 race wins. Sergio Perez will be 3rd, like he was. Was he last year in 3rd? No, he wasn't actually. He was in 2nd, wasn't he? Yeah, I think he'll drop to 3rd. He will, though, have a race win, and so will Lewis Hamilton, who I think will be 4th in the standings. Carlos Sainz then will be in 5th. Lando Norris 6th. Russell 7th. Piastri 8th. Alonso 9th. And Daniel Ricciardo will finish, I think, in the top 10 of the Drivers' Championship. So, that's a sneak peek of how I think things will go. But with my constructors prediction, I think you get a better idea as to how I think things will go in 2024. So Red Bull will win the Constructors' Championship, zero doubt about that. Ferrari, I think, will be not comfortably 2nd, but I think will have enough consistency through the year to get the job done and finish in 2nd place. Mercedes, then I'm going in 3rd. McLaren, I don't think will be very far behind, but I think Mercedes do have just a stronger team, and I think we'll start the season stronger as well, which will help them quite a bit. So yeah, McLaren will be just behind in 4th place, and in 5th, I am going Racing Bulls. Despite me predicting Alonso to be ahead of both Racing Bull drivers in the championship, because Aston Martin have Lance Stroll, who is so good at letting the team down, I think that will cost them very dearly this year. And because I think Racing Bulls, who remember, have quite a bit of wind tunnel development time this year, they'll have the 8th most, not 8th most, the 3rd most wind tunnel development time between now and the 30th of June. I think that will be the key in pushing Racing Bulls up the pecking order. And I think they will become a consistent point scoring team, and will be finishing ahead of Aston Martin in the championship. It will still be close, though, no doubt about that. And then I've got Sauber in 7th. I think they do have a legitimately good car for the midfield. Williams I've got in 8th. Alpine 9th. I think Alpine have genuinely got a bad car, plus a slow or unpowerful power unit, if that makes any sense. And then Haas I've got last because we have seen what this team is like. And even though there's a bit more optimism coming out of testing from that team than we were expecting, I still think they will be last in the championship. Make sure to let me know, guys, in the live chat and the comments, what is your predictions for the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships, and I will make sure to have a look. And also, in the live chat, get into what you guys think. And, of course, not everyone's going to have the same prediction. I can see that Will F1 thinks I'm crazy for having Sauber in 7th, but, we've seen, certain midfield teams have better seasons than we expected before. And I don't think Sauber finishing in 7th place is that crazy, to be honest. I mean, look at Williams last year, finishing in 7th. I don't think anyone thought Williams were going to finish 7th in the championship last year. So we will see how that goes. Let's get into the teams in detail, and I'll go through with the teams why I think they're going to have the seasons that I have predicted. So we will start with the world champions, the clear best team in F1, Red Bull Racing. And the first thing to get into is the results of an investigation into the conduct of the Red Bull team boss, Christian Horner, which the results were not published earlier, but the results of the investigation came out a couple hours ago, and Horner is completely cleared of any wrongdoing. The accuser, has been given the right to appeal, But yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But from what we can see, he's innocent. We have no evidence to suggest otherwise. So yeah, at the minute, case closed unless the accuser decides to go to court or whatever, try and get the truth out there if there is something more to this. But as far as we know, that's it. And Horner is cleared of any wrongdoing. And, I'm not going to sit here and speculate on what could have happened, what people think may have happened, because it's all irrelevant and the facts are what matter at the end of the day. Yeah, case closed. Again, at least for now. But with Red Bull, yeah, they've still got the best car easily in Formula One. Max Verstappen was grinning from ear to ear after testing. He was so happy with the car, and he knows, and the Red Bull team, they're not even hiding it. They know they've got a very quick car. It's not necessarily going to be lapping the field, or they're not going to be over half a minute clear at every single Grand Prix of the rest of the field, but overall, they still have comfortably the best car on the grid. And it looks like it's got, quite a bit of downforce. And despite this surprising change in philosophy with them, more so moving towards what we saw Mercedes do with their zero pod design, hasn't affected them so far. I hope it does to make things interesting in 2024. If it doesn't, then yeah, we're probably going to get a similar season to last year where they win, not every race, but almost every race. Yeah, they've got the best car, and I'm very, very confident they'll win the championship quite easily on the drivers and constructors side. Max Verstappen is obviously the best driver in the world, so he'll win the championship and he'll take loads more race wins and get even closer to breaking the race win record, which I know he's not close to doing at the moment, but with the amount of wins he's already got, if he continues at this rate, it's not going to be that long until he has the most wins Max Verstappen in F1 history. Sergio Perez, though, big year. Really needs to finish second in the championship and improve his average lap time compared to Max over the course of this season, because last year he was, dramatically off the pace, was Sergio Perez. So if he can get back to the level he was at in 2022, where he was regularly on the podium and was not, disgustingly far off his teammate, then I think Perez will have done enough to be at the team for 2025. But if he continues what he did last year, then he may even find himself not in that Red Bull by the end of the year. We'll see. I do hope he gets back to his, his best level, because I do like Sergio. He has had a great career, and it is a shame to see that he, had a bit of a drop off last season. And I'm hoping that he will just reset and go again and get back into the form that we know he can get back into. But yeah, Red Bull, they're gonna crush everyone yet again for a third season in a row. Now on to the team that ended 2023 so competitively, and look like they're going to start this year very competitively, and that is Ferrari. Ferrari look like they have got a good car. Maybe not the best car, probably not the best car, but it's a good car nonetheless. And by the sounds of it, from the drivers, it's a good car to drive rather than last year's car, which was very sensitive, especially to like windy conditions and just, anything other than dry, still normal conditions. And yeah, the Ferrari just seems better in pretty much every area, which is really good to hear, because last year's car was so unpredictable and the drivers did pretty well with it, and pretty well did Carlos Sainz to get a race win out of it, because again, it was not exactly the most comfortable car to drive. But yeah, they're still, I don't think, quite on the level of Red Bull. I think over a race distance, I think they're going to be always this year slower than Red Bull, but I don't think the gap between the two is going to be as big as what we saw at times last year. But In qualifying, I think at quite a few races we are going to see Ferrari, competitive with Red Bull. For example, this Grand Prix this weekend in Bahrain, I do think Ferrari have a shot of pole position. Maybe tomorrow when we see practice, we'll be proven wrong on that, and Red Bull will show that actually they are miles clear of everyone. And if they are, fair play. But at the moment, I do think Ferrari have a good shot of pole position because their car very well suited to that track, most powerful power unit on the grid, and obviously Charles Leclerc, one of the best drivers ever to drive at that circuit. He's always been super strong in Bahrain. So if they can start the season off hot and maybe get a pole position and, at least one car on the podium, even a double podium, that would be a really good way to start 2024. So yeah, if they can do that, then great. Over the course of the year, I think it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a bit of a back and forth at times between them and say Mercedes, who I think will get better as the season goes on. McLaren as well will get better as the season goes on. But because Ferrari are going to have probably the better qualifying car really all season, I think that will really help them. And especially if their race pace has improved, it will really help them in 2024 to just at the end of the day score more points, even if they don't necessarily have the best car out of those three teams. Yeah, Ferrari, I think, will be second in the championship. Again, not a million miles ahead of the next team, but I think they've got a good enough car for it. And the two drivers, I think, will probably maintain their level of last year. If anything, Leclerc will probably get better because this car, from what we've heard, is better and more suiting to his driving style. So we should see the Charles Leclerc of 2022 making a bit of a comeback. But Mercedes-Benz, they're not going to be too far behind. And from the sounds of it with them, their car is a step forward in performance, which is really good to hear. But unfortunately, nowhere near Red Bull, which I don't think they're really that surprised about. And Mercedes, very admittingly, saying that, Red Bull are still quite far ahead of them. Mercedes even reckon that Red Bull are a second clear of the rest of the field, which is quite dramatic, but I don't think it's quite that far. The gap between Red Bull and the next car, whether it's Mercedes or Ferrari or even McLaren, I don't think it is quite that big of a gap. So yeah, Mercedes car looks good. I mean, you heard what Russell said. They can now push the car a lot more. The rear end is not so snappy. The car is a lot more responsive to what they actually want. And that will help the drivers in the season because it means you'll get more of the best of Lewis Hamilton and more of the best of George Russell because they can actually push the car to its limit a lot more than last year's car, because last year's car was just fundamentally broken because of the design that they persisted with, which for them, because of whatever way they did it, it just did not work. Yeah, Mercedes should have a better year in terms of performance and should have a better year in terms of performance compared to Red Bull. But I don't think we'll finish second in the championship like they did last year. I think that will go to Ferrari purely because Ferrari are going to start the year, definitely for the first third of the year, I think, with the better car. And I think that overall will decide it. And Ferrari, like I said, I think will have, over the course of the year, a faster car in qualifying, which will help them for every race day have a better chance, of course, of more points being scored than Mercedes. So, yeah, if you're a Mercedes fan, don't be too expectant of this year. And to be honest, I'd say a success for this year, considering where they were last year, I think would be getting a race win, of course, but just in general, being closer to Red Bull on performance. And if they can be that, then that would be great. But I think definitely in Bahrain, we're not necessarily going to see the best of them because I don't think the Bahrain track suits their car that well. I mean, we saw that last year and the year before that they were quite weak in Bahrain. So should get better a bit further into the season, should the Silver Arrows, who of course will have Lewis Hamilton at their team for the final time in 2024. Now on to another Mercedes-powered team in McLaren. And yeah, McLaren's car a lot better than this it was this time last year. They're not looking as strong as they were towards the end of last season, where they had, I think, at least the third best car on the grid, at times the second best car on the grid. Yeah, not quite that good. They've definitely lost a bit of lap time over the winter, which isn't necessarily a surprise because we have to remember, compared to Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes, in terms of finances and infrastructure, I think Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes are just better and have better, I guess, resources than McLaren do. And that's why McLaren have not necessarily been that great over the last decade or so, because they've fallen behind in that aspect. Of course, that's why they've been, trying to build this new wind tunnel simulator, all that stuff, try and close that gap going forward for the long term. So, yeah, not necessarily a surprise, but McLaren are still a front-running team. There is no doubt about that. They are in the fight with Mercedes. They are quicker than Aston Martin. I'm pretty confident about that. And yes, they are a bit off Ferrari, but I don't think that's going to be the case all season. I think there will be weekends this year where McLaren are quicker. Probably higher aero circuits, you would imagine, where McLaren will have the better pace. But really, it's going to come down to in-season development for McLaren as to where they finish. I think they'll finish in fourth. I don't think their in-season development is going to be as great for them this year as it was last season. I think to expect this season, the in-season development to be as good as it was last season is a bit naive, considering you have to remember the car that McLaren started 2023 with was basically a 2022 car that they properly updated into being a 2023 car once we got midway through the season. That's not really the case with this 2024 McLaren. Most of this McLaren is what they want for 2024, but still in-season development needed to get to the absolute, maximum of what they can do. So I don't think we're going to see like a massive jump in performance in the season. I mean, if we do, that's amazing. That would be great. Maybe then McLaren could properly fight Red Bull, which would be really exciting to see. But I just don't think that is quite going to happen. And because of that, I think they'll be fourth, very close behind Mercedes, not too far behind Ferrari, but overall just not strong enough with their car to beat those two manufacturer teams. But they are going to be competitive. And I think I could be wrong on McLaren this season. I think, if they were to finish third in the championship, I think I wouldn't be surprised by that. So, yeah, we'll see how they end up this season. But, yeah, I know certain people are not too big on them at the minute and think they're, like quite a bit away from Mercedes. But I honestly, I would say ignore those people because I think they are not quicker than Mercedes, but I think they're not very far behind at all. I think they're, in the fight definitely with Mercedes. Let's go on to another Mercedes-powered team in Aston Martin. And Aston Martin are just simply nowhere near as good as they were this time last year. This time last year, they had, in race conditions, the second best car. They definitely don't have that this year. I mean, in race conditions, their car is not bad, but it isn't the car of this time last year. It's more like the car we saw at the end of last season, where it was closer to the midfield. Maybe not proper midfield pace, but not exactly like proper front running pace either. They're kind of in between front runners and midfield runners. So, yeah, I don't have great hope for this team. We saw last year that in-season development was not very good. I mean, we have to wait and see at this point whether they will be able to correct that in 2024. I'm not going to sit here and say that they will because we are yet to see if they will, because that was really a big disaster of theirs last year, and that's why they weren't able to finish in the top two or top three of the championship because of that in-season development being just so poor from the team, and that's why they eventually ended up finishing down in fifth, which was quite the fall off from that team. So yeah, I think they are probably throughout the season at best going to be the fifth best team. But as I said, with Racing Bulls, I think Racing Bulls will develop very well this season, and they do have Racing Bulls quite a bit more time in the wind tunnel in the first half of this year compared to Aston Martin. I think like an extra 15%, is it? Which might not sound a lot, but it is quite a bit. And I think, from what we saw of Racing Bulls last year, with their development in the second half of the year, where they really got very strong at the end of last season, they keep that up, then I think Racing Bulls will, by the end of the season, have a better car than Aston Martin. And because Racing Bulls, I think, have a overall stronger driver lineup, I think will be finishing ahead of the Aston Martin team. So yeah, I think Aston Martin will be sixth in the championship. Really, not necessarily because the car is going to be too bad and not good enough for fifth, but Lance Stroll, man on screen. As I said in my video, Lance Stroll is finished, which, by the way, link below in the description if you've not seen that video yet. Been viewed by, I think, over 100,000 people. Not to boast. Yeah, I just think Stroll is going to let the team down again, even if the car is, decently quick. Yeah, not that high hopes for Aston Martin, which it's a shame to say because I would really love to sit here and say Aston Martin are looking like they could be in the fight with Mercedes and maybe not too far behind Ferrari and be, to a degree, podium contenders this season. But I just don't think their car is really quite there like it was this time last year in Bahrain. So, yeah, don't see that, but I think that is really just the truth of where this team is. And in my view, finishing fifth in the championship will be whatever the fuck you want to call this team. Visa Cash App RB Formula One team, also known as Racing Bulls. That's what they're officially called on their entry sheet, or on the entry sheet for the F1 Championship, the FIA. And that is what I am going to be calling them in 2024. Yeah, the car is good. Maybe not super strong for the first couple Grand Prix on the calendar, given the characteristics of those types of tracks. But I think they've got a good car here. The drivers sound very happy. The team sounds very happy. And I think they've got definitely a good car for the season, and probably a car that's about as quick as what they had at the end of last season. But again, with them having for the first half of this year a bit more development time compared to your Aston Martins and even Ferraris, Mercedes, and McLarens, they used that well, like they did last season, to improve the way they did. Then this team could be a real dark horse this season, and I think personally they are the dark horse of 2024. And clearly the team to watch out for, because if we're going to get a surprise podium or even a surprise win, I think they could be that team. You never know, do you, at certain race weekends, in terms of track layout, weather conditions, whatever, loads of DNFs, you just don't know. Maybe they will end up, surprisingly getting a podium, or even better. So yeah, watch out for them this season. I've got very good hopes for this team going forward. And of course, a big reason why the car is a lot better is because it's a lot more following on from the Red Bull car of last season. I think they've got the same suspension, Racing Bulls, as their sister team. So, yeah, with the Red Bull car last season obviously being clearly the best car last season, not going to be too bad for them, is it? Running this car, which is not a copy of that Red Bull, but most of it is, let's say, inspired by that Red Bull. So, yeah, I think they'll be very competitive. And like I said, top 5 in the championship, I think they will just about get because, again, overall, better driver lineup, stronger driver lineup, more consistent driver lineup. And I think second half of the season, they will have more than not a faster car compared to Aston Martin. But now let's go on to some of the other midfield teams before we get to looking at this Bahrain Grand Prix for this weekend. Go on to Alpine. What a disaster they were in testing again. You know, with them not having the most powerful power unit, it was always going to be, you know, excessively bad, this preseason testing for them. You know, if we had testing in Barcelona, I'm sure people would have a bit of a better opinion of them. But their car does not look good. It looks like it's the second worst car at best on the grid right now, which is shockingly poor. Given the resources they've got, the money they've got, I mean, at the end of the day, guys, this is still basically the Renault Works team. And we're going into a Formula One season wondering whether they've got the worst car on the grid or not. How on earth is that possible? How can you be that bad? With that, again, that amount of money, the resources, the drivers they've got, the engineers, like, how is that possible? It's baffling. And really, it sums up this team, which is, again, basically Renault. It sums them up since 2016. Because since 2016, it has been case after case, season after season, where you're wondering, how does this team not seem to get it right? Why is this team still actually just stuck in the midfield? Why do they never seemingly move forward? And it's because they just don't, I don't know what it is exactly, but they just don't seem to be able to get anywhere near enough out of what they do possess with the resources and cash and all of that. And overall, when everything comes together, it's just a very poor effort considering the money and resources that are there. I think, you know, if this team had the money and resources that Haas did, Alpine probably for the last few years would be at the back of the grid because they have wasted so much money, well over $1 billion in the last few years on failed car after failed car. Yeah, they had a race win a couple years ago. They've had some podiums here or there, but again, with the amount of money they pumped in, the resources they've got, it's simply not good enough. Simply not good enough. And this is basically a culmination of all of that failure. And if they are truly one of the worst teams on the grid this season, which I do believe they probably will be, then they may as well write off next season as well. Because, I mean, what's the point trying to improve their car for next season when 2026 is, you know, so close? So, yeah, this team is dead. Absolutely dead in the water. Wouldn't be surprised if by the next Concord agreement that is obviously yet to be signed, wouldn't be surprised if this team pulled out of F1. Would not be surprised at all because they're not getting the return, are they? For the, you know, the money being put in. Obviously, we had a story last year about all those investors, you know, Hollywood actors and different people, about them, you know, putting money into the, you know, the project to try and help things, but not going anywhere, is it? It just won't drive this team, no pun intended, any further up the grid, and they've gone backwards, clearly. I know they lost, what was it, Alan Permain, their sporting director, midway through last season, but I don't know if that's it. Maybe, you know, because he was with the Enstone team for, what, over 30 years. I don't know if him leaving has had that big of an effect on how things have gone, but this team is quite clearly dead in the water, and they have absolutely no chance at all of scoring a point in Bahrain. No way are they scoring a point in Bahrain. And we'll go on to Williams, who have a decent car. I think it's going to be a similar case with Williams to last year, even though Alex Albon said coming out of testing that it feels like the car is a lot more suited to different types of tracks compared to what they had last year, where it was a lot more suited to high-speed circuits. I still think to a degree that is going to be what this Williams car is. It's still going to be very strong at those high-speed circuits, and I still think we'll probably retain the strengths of what we saw last year. Because why wouldn't you want to retain the strength of having the fastest car down the straights? So I still think that will be happening for Williams to a degree, but they will be probably stronger at your Monaco's, Singapore's, Grand Prix like that, where last year they, would fall off dramatically in performance. And it's a lot more of an all-around car as opposed to being a car that was, so devilishly quick at your Monza-type racetracks and Bahrain, for example, this time last year, of course, scoring a point. So, yeah, it's a decent car, but not quite maybe as strong in certain areas as it was last year. So, I mean, overall, for Williams, I think we're going to have to probably wait 4 or 5 races into the year to really understand how good their car is. And of course, if you remember the last couple seasons, Williams have brought 2 massive in-season upgrades, basically B cars, again, in season. And I do wonder whether they'll go for that again this year. So if they do, maybe we don't expect them to be super competitive, right away in 2024, because they might get a lot better midway through the season like we saw last year and again the year before that. But yeah, it's a decent car, but I don't think anything special. But it will be, around about where they were last year for the championship, and I predicted them, I think, was it 8th? Which is still not too bad, considering this team is, still financially not in the greatest position, and infrastructure-wise is still trying to update their stuff for the modern era. Now, let's go on to again, don't know what you want to call them, Stake F1 team, Sauber, Kick, Stake Kick Sauber, Stick Kick, Fuck. I don't know what you want to call them, but I will be calling them this season Sauber, which is really their real name. And yeah, looks like their car is maybe not a clear step forward on last year's car, but it's definitely better than last year's car. Last year's car was a decent car, but it was a bit too draggy, that car from last year, because they would be regularly, despite having a Ferrari power unit, they'd be regularly quite a few kilometers an hour slower than the Ferrari Works team and the Haas team as well, despite obviously having the same power unit. And that really did come down, I think, to the design of the car. And clearly, with the design of the car this year, it's been improved in a way that has limited that, and just in general has more downforce. And I think we'll start this year quicker than how they were last year. Because last year they started a bit slow, got better, but it wasn't really that much better. So, yeah, I think Sauber will have a better year. And, yeah, I think they will finish 7th in the championship. But a big reason for that is they have the second most wind tunnel development time for the first half of the year in 2024. And if they can use that well, which I think they will, then that will help what is a fundamentally decent car to start the season with. Yeah, I think Sauber will have a good season, and 7th in the championship would be maybe not the best realistically they can do, but it's not too far away from realistically what they can do right now with what they've got. So, yeah, if they were to finish in 7th, that would be a good season for the team. Valtteri Bottas, I think, will have another decent year. Not an amazing year, but, good enough for that team. Zhou Guanyu, though, big season for him, because it's his 3rd season in F1. And after 2 underwhelming seasons, he needs to show something this year, especially with Théo Pourchaire in Super Formula, who, if he wins that, which he probably will, if Teo, is looking good in that, and Zhou still hasn't shown any real improvement in Formula One, then I think this will probably be Zhou's final year as a Formula One driver. So needs to step up this year, and I hope he does. Even though I'm not a big fan of him, I do hope he steps up because I want to see the best drivers on the grid, and if he can show that he is truly good enough, then let's be seeing it. Yeah, Sauber, I think we'll have a good season this season and definitely be scoring points more often than not. And finally, RSF1, and yeah, I'm still pretty confident that they will have overall for the year the worst car development wise, even though they've been talking about how they expect some in-season development to really make this car a bit better. We've seen with this team so many times that they never get better during the course of the season. They never develop well. And I don't see that changing for 2024 despite a new team principal. So, yeah, I think Haas will finish in last. I have heard that apparently the car isn't wearing its tyres out as much. And that might be related to the Ferrari car and how much they've improved, because of course Haas and Ferrari do have a very similar car in terms of certain parts, so maybe that's helping them in 2024. But I still think overall this team is just not good enough to finish any higher than last in the championship, and overall their car is still going to be pretty shit, I think, in 2024. For those guys are my thoughts for the teams for the 2024 season. And with us, an hour into the stream, and make sure to, by the way, if you haven't already, smash that like button before the end of the stream. What we are going to do, before I come to your comments in the chat, guys, is get into the Bahrain Grand Prix, of course, because tomorrow is practice 1 and practice 2. Just want to update you guys, though, as to my schedule for the Bahrain Grand Prix. So I will be going live next on Friday, which will be the 1st of March at 2:30 p.m. UK time. That's 1 hour and a half before qualifying begins at the Sakhir circuit. So make sure to join me for that qualifying watch along on Friday. And then on Saturday, I'll be live from 12 p.m. UK time. That's 3 hours before lights out in Bahrain. The race preview, which will be quite a long one, and then the race watch along itself. I don't know if Nib is going to be joining me, because I think Liverpool kick off at the same time as the Bahrain Grand Prix. So we will have to see whether he'll be on for that. But if he's not, then he'll definitely be on for the Saudi Arabian one the following week. But yeah, that's the plan for the channel this weekend for the Bahrain Grand Prix. So if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. And like I said, make sure to smash the like button if you haven't already. Cannot wait to get into qualifying and the race. And thankfully, first 2 races being on Saturday means that we get it just a bit earlier, the beginning of the season. But yeah, let's get into the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend. And what I'm going to start with, before I get on to my predictions, let's get into the schedule of the weekend, in case you guys didn't know, in terms of the timings and all of that. So here they are. So practice 1 tomorrow, 11:30 till 12:30, and then practice 2, 3 p.m. until 4 p.m. And then practice 3 on Friday, 12:30 till 1:30, then qualifying at 4 p.m. And then the race at 3 p.m. All those times, by the way, are GMT, which is the time here in the UK. So if you are, in a different time zone, obviously you have to do the time conversion. But those are all the timings of all the sessions, and cannot wait to see what happens in practice 2, especially tomorrow, to see what the performance is like, where teams are at. We will find out a lot more in practice 2 than we did throughout all of testing. But let me get into now my predictions for qualifying and the race. Now, I just want to say, before you guys see them, remember, we've not had a practice session yet for this weekend's Grand Prix, and we didn't really find out a ton over testing. So these predictions are probably going to be quite wrong. And of course, they're not my final predictions. I will revise them once we get to race day, once we've had a lot more data from practice on Thursday and qualifying on Friday. So just saying that before you guys absolutely destroy me in the comments or the live chat. So let's get into it. So for qualifying, I think Charles Leclerc will just about take pole position ahead of Max Verstappen in what will be a classic qualifying session under the lights in Bahrain. Verstappen will be just behind in second. Perez will be in third, just ahead of Carlos Sainz in fourth. And then I'm going Russell in fifth, Hamilton in sixth, Norris seventh, just behind the two Mercedes drivers, with Piastri in eighth. Alonso, I'm going in ninth. And Valtteri Bottas of the Sauber, I think, will make the top 10. Bottas, remember, very competitive. He is normally in Bahrain. Hold on. I've just seen what I forgot to do. I forgot to copy my mic over, so you may have heard me. I heard my mic cut out for a second there. So hold on. Right, so you should be able to hear me now. Yep, I think you can. Yeah, here is my race prediction. So even though I think Ferrari will just about take pole position, I think Red Bull still comfortably win the race. Verstappen, I think, will win from Sergio Perez. Same 1-2 as last season. Verstappen winning, I think, by about 10 seconds from Perez. Leclerc will be third, about pit stop behind Verstappen by the end. Carlos Sainz then will be in fourth, with Hamilton in fifth. Norris not too far behind in sixth. Russell seventh. Piastri 8th, Alonso 9th, and Yuki Tsunoda for Racing Bulls, I think, will take the final point in Bahrain. Remember, of course, in Bahrain, the track is quite high speed. It definitely helps if you have a car that is quick down the straights. And in terms of, if I go back to my qualifying predictions, in terms of the pecking order for this weekend, I think, yeah, qualifying, I think it will be Red Bull and Ferrari basically on similar pace, and then Mercedes third, McLaren fourth, Aston Martin fifth, Sauber just about sixth, Racing Bulls seventh, Williams eighth, and then Haas ninth, Alpine 10th. And then for the race pace, I'm going to go Red Bull quickest, Ferrari second, Mercedes third, McLaren fourth, Aston Martin fifth, Racing Bull sixth, probably Sauber in seventh, Williams eighth, Alpine ninth, Haas 10th. That's what I think the pecking order will be this weekend in Bahrain. But that is basically, guys, it for my season preview. But let's hear what you guys have to say. And I'm going to try and go through some of your best comments. Hello to all of you beautiful people. Hopefully you're all doing well. Silverback says, hello, not looking forward to this year based on Max over a second up, not even trying. I don't think they're going to be that strong. Yanni's saying, Shazza, stop fat shaming your Alpine. It is funny though, isn't it? The car's overweight, even though it's mostly carbon in terms of the livery to save on weight. Sums that team up. It really, really does. They are the French version of what Ferrari could say still are, but definitely were under Mattia Binotto. They are definitely the French version of that team. And that's why I was kind of hoping in a way, just for entertainment, that Binotto was going to be team boss of Alpine, because it would have been prime time viewing. It really would have been. Let me see if I can find some comments I've not seen yet. Yeah, Will F1 Alba 7th. He obviously doesn't think that that's going to happen. Laurie Rastogi says, wouldn't surprise me if Leclerc scores a fair few poles. I think what you saw at the end of last season, if you remember, what was it, Mexico, Vegas, US Grand Prix, we had, was it Carlos Sainz a couple of times on pole? I think that type of form in qualifying is what you're going to see with Ferrari this season. They're going to be very good in qualifying, but they're still going to be lacking that probably third of a second a lap to really fight Red Bull for race wins. Silverback saying Aston is a good car. Lance runs the team, but a better driver in, and the team will be a top 5 solid team every race. Probably. Hello, by the way, to Ronan. Good to see you, mate. Will F1 says most experts have put Aston 5th, but right on the back of McLaren and Mercedes. Close enough for Alonso to make the difference, I think. Maybe not at tracks like Bahrain, again, because I don't think the car will be as close to McLaren and Mercedes around those types of circuits. But I think when we get to places like Monaco, Barcelona, then yeah, I think you could see Alonso try to work some magic there. Of course, though, you know, if we go back to my predictions, you know, driver's title here, and then the constructors, I am going to be wrong. I can't remember what my predictions were for the 2023 season, but I know they weren't, you know, 100% correct. So, you know, there's going to be a couple teams this season that surprises me. I mean, you know, McLaren obviously was a good example last season. I thought McLaren were going to finish, I think, was it 7th or 8th last season? Something like that. And they ended up 4th. And, I mean, they weren't a million miles away from the 2 teams ahead of them. So, yeah. Will F1's top 10 for the season is Verstappen, Leclerc, Perez, Alonso, 4th. That's interesting. Norris, Sainz, Piastri, Hamilton, Russell, Tsunoda. So you clearly don't think Mercedes are going to be very good. Looney Classics says Aston Martin need to have one eye on 2026 already. I think with Honda powering them, they will be a force. I think, yeah, if this year they are like more of a midfield team, then I think probably it would be best if they just started focusing on 2026, because they're not going to do anything special next season if they haven't really got something fundamentally good here. Laurie Rastogi saying at the start of the year, Aston Martin might be close-ish with McLaren and Mercedes, but I think they'll fade away due to lack of development. Laurie says, I liked it when you said Visa, Cash App, RB, go fuck yourself, F1 Shazza in one of your previous streams. It's such a silly name, isn't it? But, you know, I think Racing Bulls is the right thing to call them, because that's what their name really is. Find some other comments here. Alpine have got worse, if anything, since 2018. Well, not even since 2018. If you look at, you know, I mean, in 2020, what was it? 2022, they were 4th in the championship. They were not clearly ahead of McLaren in that way, but they did have a better car. They were the best midfield team. The only 3 teams better than them, clearly better than them, were Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes. And since then, they have completely shat the bed. They've gone from being the 4th best team to possibly having the worst car in 2 years. That is incredibly special effort to go from that extreme. Well, not even extreme, from there, you know, to the back of the grid. It's quite incredible. Paulie saying, I heard Alpine's coffee shop has very good cross. Tin Toy Cast says Williams would be better than Alpine. Yeah, probably. Laurie says if Williams can be a bit higher in the midfield more regularly, I think that's a realistic target. Another reason as well I had Williams in 8th below Sauber is because they have Logan Sargent, and I still don't think that Logan Sargent is going to be good enough for that team, which doesn't help compared to teams like Sauber, Haas, Alpine. Great job today, Kazza. Cheers for that, Silverback. Paulie says Gunter should be the FIA race director. He will be back in the back. Sorry. He will be back in the paddock, is what I was going to say. I think Melbourne, Nib said, he's doing like a meet and greet and what was it? Like an hour-long talk in front of a crowd, I think. So we will see him again. Laurie Rostogi says, I heard an article saying Haas will be better than Sauber, maybe in qualifying they'll be, but not in the race. Yeah, I've heard certain people are quite optimistic with Haas, but I think maybe that's because we were so expectant of them being so shit. So we need to be careful with our predictions with Haas, because maybe they're not as bad as we thought they were, but that might not mean that they're like, you know, properly competitive in the midfield. Put it that way. But thank you guys for coming along for tonight's stream. Been great to have you. And let me just finish up that poll in chat. I'll get to the and yeah, Ronan's saying on the chat, Gunter is going to work for Sky Germany. Yeah, a couple races he's going to be doing this year. And I'll get to the results of that poll, by the way, in a moment. A quick reminder, though, again, next 2 live streams on the channel. I'll be live on Friday at 2:30 p.m. UK time for the qualifying watch-along for the Bahrain Grand Prix. Make sure to come along for that. An hour and a half's build-up we'll have, and then obviously watching along the session, and we'll do a reaction afterwards. And then on Saturday, live 3 hours before lights out, 12 p.m. UK time for the race watch-along. We'll be live for probably about 5 hours at least on Saturday. One thing I did quickly want to just touch on before I went is I wanted to update you guys on the website I talked about a few weeks ago, and also this video that I touched on as well, that I was hoping to upload a couple of weeks ago, but just wasn't and still is not ready. Yeah, those or the website will, you know, is still being worked on, and I'm hoping by the time we get to Easter, that website will be properly ready and operational and will be, you know, away, and you know, you guys will be able to use it. And there'll also be a donation service there where you guys can donate to the channel. Of course, you guys can donate via a super chat here on YouTube, but you can also donate over there, which I will sort out in the next few weeks or so. But I'll let you guys know officially when I do get that all you know, properly set up. And then with the video I'm working on, and I've been working on for the last few months, it is quite a long video. It's going to be like an hour-long video. It's like a proper, I don't know if you call it, well, not short film, but I don't know what you would call it exactly, a documentary piece or whatever, but it will be coming out soon. I'm hoping to have that finished by the end of March, which I know Easter is at the end of March. So, yeah, I will let you guys know when, you know, one of those, obviously when both of those officially are finished, and I'll be able to give you more information. But I just wanted to let you guys know, updates on that. But yeah, I'll read out the results of the poll quickly. 75 votes on the poll asking who will be the closest challenger for Red Bull in 2024, and 63% of the vote went to Ferrari. Mercedes in second on 26%, McLaren third on 6%, and Aston Martin fourth on 2%. And I agree. I think Ferrari are Red Bull's closest competitors. But yeah, that's it for the stream, guys. Thank you for coming along. Again, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. Make sure to smash the like button before you go as well. It does help the channel grow. Make sure to check out my latest recorded video from a couple of months ago about Lance Stroll, if you haven't already. And if you want to be part of our community, make sure to join the Discord server, link below in the description and in the live chat. Great place, that Discord server, for updates for live streams, videos, and also just updates as to what I'm doing with the channel. So yeah, if you want those, make sure to join the Discord server. Link is in the chat and again in the description. But guys, until the qualifying watch along that I'll be doing and starting up at 2:30 p.m. UK time, 90 minutes before qualifying begins in Bahrain in just 2 days from now. It's been me, Kazza HD. Goodbye.